Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Boxing New.
Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia is a dangerous fight, and let's just break it down honestly and objectively as possible. And we get this information from Mike Coppinger, also Lance Pugmire, The Athletic, and the LA Times, basically saying sources tell them that Errol Spence Jr. is expected to fight Danny Garcia in his comeback from a horrific car crash this fall on pay-per-view. These two had agreed to fight in principle and to meet on January 25th before Errol Spence Jr. got in that horrific car crash. So at the end of the day, this fight has been planned for such a long time, and it's finally ready to come to fruition. Now at this point, if we got to be honest and unbiased about the initial fight, the way I saw the fight before the car crash, before Errol Spence Jr. got hurt, I thought that Errol Spence Jr. would win this fight. I think it was still somewhat of a difficult and challenging fight for Errol Spence in some ways, but at the end of the day, I did favor Errol Spence Jr. to beat Danny Garcia in the initial fight. Now that things have changed, though, that changes my perspective. This has become an entirely extremely dangerous fight for Errol Spence, and this will not be an easy task. And we're just going to break it down honestly and objectively as possible. And we start, with the car crash itself. Errol Spence Jr. was in a car crash. This is a crash where he was thrown face first, out of a car. He wasn't able to spar because he lost teeth, and he's waiting for his implants to be drilled into his skull. So at this point, you see that Errol Spence Jr., if he's ever deserved a tune-up, he deserves one for this. And I give him mad respect for taking a Danny Garcia fight when most fighters, would have taken a tune-up. And everyone would understand you need a tune-up after a horrific crash like that. You need to take it easy. And, fighting a guy like Danny Garcia who has power, who can box, who's accomplished at 140, that's a dangerous fight for Errol Spence Jr. coming off a car crash and not knowing what he has left in the tank. So, I give mad respect and props to Errol Spence Jr. for stepping up and taking on a legitimate fight. I can respect that. Now let's just break down the fight honestly and objectively. When you look at Errol Spence Jr., and we'll start with him, you see that he was aiming to knock out Mikey Garcia, but he couldn't. This is a guy moving up 2 weight classes. This is Errol Spence Jr. at his very best before any car crash, and he was unable to knock out Mikey Garcia. I think this, along with the fact that he wasn't able to knock out Sean Porter, along with the fact that Errol Spence Jr., even at his very best, couldn't knock out 2 guys, one moving up 2 weight classes and the other one who has been dropped by guys like Adrian Broner. You look at it like this, and Errol Spence Jr. is supposed to be the strong guy at the welterweight division, the big guy, the man down guy. He's just, that facade has been exposed to a degree. Errol Spence Jr. is not knocking out dudes at the top tier of the welterweight division. He's simply not. He doesn't have transcendent power. He has good pop, he has good power, he has respectable pop, respectable power, and it's still an attribute, but it's not elite. And then you look at the Sean Porter fight. The guy went life and death with Sean Porter. The guy was out there looking like Floyd against Mikey Garcia, but when he ended up fighting Sean Porter, a true welterweight, a guy that's in his weight class, a guy that's used to competing at that weight class, Errol Spence Jr. looked basic. And you know what I mean by that is that Sean Porter was turning him. He literally went life and death in that fight. It's a controversial fight because a lot of people had Sean Porter winning that fight. No matter who you had winning it, you knew that it was a very difficult night for Errol Spence Jr. You knew it was a night where Errol Spence Jr. boxing abilities looked terrible. But either way it goes, he did get the victory. And one interesting thing he said after the fight is that I felt Sean Porter's power tougher than I thought. Now, Errol Spence Jr., he's being honest, and I can respect that. But, Sean Porter is not a big puncher in the welterweight division. He's not an elite puncher. He's a good puncher, for who he is. He brings pressure, and that's his thing. But the fact that he stated specifically that I felt Sean Porter power, it lets me know a few things, because if you watch the fight closely, you could see that there was a few moments where Errol Spence Jr. looked a little hurt. And you also look back at the Kell Brook fight that Errol Spence Jr. had, where he looked a little hurt at moments in that fight early before Kell Brook, before the eye injury and things like that. So you see that Errol Spence Jr., he can be hurt. It is possible to hurt this guy. He does have a respectable chin, but he can be hurt, and I wouldn't put it above somebody like Danny Garcia, who has a big shot to be able to hurt Errol Spence at some point in this fight. And especially the fact that Errol Spence Jr. is somewhat damaged goods at this point. But this is a prove-it fight for Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. has to prove that he is where he left off. He's still a unified champion. He deserves to be champion. And if you can't beat a guy like Danny Garcia, then you're just not the same. And so at the end of the day, this is a prove-it fight for Errol Spence Jr. to prove that he still belongs at the top of the welterweight division with Terrence Crawford, and that fight still makes a lot of sense. That fight is still going to be a great fight because he's still at the top of the division with Terrence Crawford. So this is a prove-it fight for Errol Spence, but a very dangerous fight for Errol Spence. And when you look at Danny Garcia, you see that Danny Garcia, this guy, when you look at the Keith Thurman fight, he's lost every major fight he had in the welterweight division. You start with Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman beat him in unified titles. Okay, so then Danny Garcia gets another crack at it, faces Sean Porter. Sean Porter beat him. And so, that's his two biggest fights in the welterweight division. He was beat. Now, I'm going to put it like this. Danny Garcia didn't get blown out in those fights. He didn't get washed in those fights. He lost two close competitive fights against two very good opponents. Now, here's my thing. Danny Garcia is the type of guy that hasn't been able to get over that hump, but it somewhat looks like he's even regressed from that. In his most recent fight against an Ivan Redkach, the guy looked pathetic. He went 12 rounds with the guy who should have been knocked out in the first 5. So we got to be honest and unbiased about it. And then, Danny Garcia and Errol Spence Jr. both displayed discipline issues. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. When you look at Danny Garcia, he came out and stated that, I didn't feel my best in that Redkach fight. I had to lose 25 pounds in 8 weeks. That's an enormous amount of weight within 8 weeks to lose. And you got to look at it like this. Danny Garcia putting his body through that type of strain means that he's not disciplined. He's not keeping himself within a respectable weight in between training camps, training all year round, being disciplined, eating the right things, doing the right things, and, being a gym rat. These are the things that make good fighters great. And that's not what Danny Garcia is doing. And then when you turn the reverse in and you look at a guy like Errol Spence Jr., Errol Spence Jr. said somewhat the same. He says, I got to keep my weight in control from now on. This is after the Sean Porter fight. Ain't nothing cool about blowing up 25 plus pounds and having to spend camp losing that weight. So, it's the same thing. Both of these guys shown, that, hey, we're not disciplined. We like to party. We like to eat. We like to, we don't sit in the gym when we're not working for a fight. And that shows that these guys are good fighters, just not great ones. The great ones stay in camp. You look at Canelo Alvarez. You look at Terrence Crawford. You look at Anthony Joshua. You look at Floyd Mayweather. These guys have shown a propensity of being top-level, elite-level type of fighters. Andre Ward. These guys are always in the gym. These guys are always in shape. These guys are always ready. These guys are not ballooning up in almost 30 pounds in between fights and then struggling to make the weight. No, these guys are staying in constant fight-ready shape. And, and that just separates the good fighters from the great ones. But this is a very evenly matched fight and a very dangerous one for Errol Spence Jr. You look, at the end of the day, these guys are going to fight a razor-thin fight. And this fight could go either way. It honestly could. But Errol Spence Jr. needs to prove himself that he's still at the top of the welterweight division. Danny Garcia needs to prove that he belongs at the top of the welterweight division. This is his grand opportunity. And look, if Danny Garcia wins, I give him all the credit in the world. Same with Errol Spence Jr. But Errol Spence Jr. is also coming off a car crash. He may never be the same. So if Danny Garcia loses this fight, it'll say a lot more about him than it will about Errol Spence Jr. But once again, unbiased as always, it's the IBFP.